Doctors of Reddit, what is the weirdest thing a patient wouldn't admit? MRI tech here. I've had a lot of big tough men deny they are claustrophobic. I position them on the table, usually laying on their back, and confirm with them they are comfortable before putting them in the MRI. Literally 5 seconds after I put them in the MRI, they are in a panic or screaming "get me out." After bringing back out, I ask if they felt anxious in the MRI, while their face is already flush and perspiring. It's always no. I was uncomfortable laying on my back or another lame excuse to continue denying claustrophobia. Even though I do step-by-step communication with them and nothing was said before. There is nothing wrong with having claustrophobia, I tell them. But they always shrug it off as something else. I'm not a doctor but work in the medical imaging field. I once went to a site in Texas and repaired their MRI machine. I asked the staff if they wanted to test the machine on a patient before I left to fly back home. They said yes. They had a co-worker there who needed his knee examined. So, the guy comes in the room and we ask him all the questions. Including, you don't have any metal implants, electronics, or metal items on your person, do you? He assured us he did not. So we put him in position and wham. The MRI machine, a big magnet, yanks his concealed carry pistol out of his waistband into the magnet. Did $20,000 worth of damage to the machine. Had a homeless patient come in for a colostomy bag replacement. He said it got dislodged while sleeping. No big deal. Life on the streets is rough and shit happens. He came in 3 days in a row for the same complaint. By day 3 everyone knew the guy was lying about its falling off. Come to find out he finally told one of the doctors he was selling his colostomy site on the streets as a Detroit sidecar. Look it up on Urban Dictionary. I always wondered if he charged extra for dirty talk. I had a patient in clinic who said he'd been feeling a little lightheaded lately and wanted to know what was going on. He said he drank maybe 1 beer per week. At one point in the visit he passed out and vomited on me. When he came to, I asked him if this had happened before. He said yes. I asked him if this is what he meant by lightheaded. He said yes. I got some labs. How sodium was super low. At this point I asked if he timed the truth about his drinking, since this was pretty clearly a case of beer potomania. He eventually admitted that he drank at least 6 beers per day and almost never ate food. Yeah. No shit. We did manage to keep him from dying. So that's a plus. Not me and not a doctor. But my mom's a dentist and I used to help her with her files and stuff. One day this dude had an appointment booked on a Saturday morning and you could smell like 50 different kinds of alcohol on him. I swear. It was like a fucking brewery. The fucker was also clearly shit-faced and probably didn't even sleep that day, cause we found him by the front door while opening up the place at 7 a.m. and he was waiting there for God knows how long. He didn't want to admit he went out last night to drink. Instead he insisted that his wife had told him to rinse his mouth with moonshine in order to sterilize his rotten tooth before my mom pulled it out. Beyond saving, and that's saying something when it comes to my mom. The woman absolutely hates pulling out teeth. When he opened his mouth it was death. I was like 5 feet away at my desk filing and organizing the week's patient files and I could feel it. This motherfucker probably hadn't brushed his teeth in the past week. He never admitted he was sloshed. Which makes it worse seeing as this was a small town and he was the guy that held the title of town drunk. Med student. Went to see a patient for my practice physical. These are all volunteers and we don't get charts or anything, just a slip of paper with their name and chief complaint. I walk into the room and this elder gentleman is holding his cup of coffee and didn't shake my hand, which threw me off guard. Then I noticed one of his hands was much weaker and kind of scrunched up and he didn't move it. So I asked him about it and he was like, "No, it's fine. See?" And proceeded to move it like a 1/2 inch. It clearly was not fine. I'm sweating now cause these are mainly just opportunities to talk with patients and these are supposed to be a breeze, but this guy looks like he had a stroke and had no idea. Turns out he was just messing with me. But I was ready to call in a real doctor cause I was freaking the fuck out. Edit. The dude really did have a stroke. It was 15 years ago and only affected his one arm. He just liked to pretend it was fine. Once he made that clear, the rest of the history physical was great. Patients lie about the most mundane things. They will tell you they don't smoke cigarettes when you can smell it all over them. You can see a pack in their purse. And you physically saw them smoking outside before they came in for their appointment. That's not what annoys me though. What annoys me most is that patients will Google what they think is their diagnosis. Admit they did. Get their diagnosis right. Then argue with you about the recommended treatment and deny having read that also. The classic example is bronchitis. Patients will Google it. Read the Wikipedia article. Then still come in and demand antibiotics. When you confront them with this, they will pretend they didn't know that they read that antibiotics do not work. They do this with almost any disease in which the treatment is conservative management, and yet they will still come in asking for treatment that has no evidence. If you are going to become an internet expert, don't do it 50% and deny you didn't read the part about treatment. Edit. Roughly 80% of what comes into urgent cares can be managed at home with nothing. Rest. Drink fluids. Take Tylenol. I am a doctor. Not a single random thing up my ass is weird to me anymore. I've heard or seen it all. Nor is it that surprising when somebody is wacko enough to claim they got Lyme disease sexually from their husband, who got it vertically from his mother. And that's why they are sterile. If you aren't aware, this is bonkers. The actual weirdest thing for me was that one time when a severely obese person just refused to admit they ate anything but one small salad a day. It just comes down to math. You cannot get up to 500 pounds unless you put 500 pounds of stuff into you at a decent pace. Plus we found a snack wrapper in the inaccessible folds of your pants. Jeebus. One of my lecturers told us a story of when he worked in ED. There was a man who refused to acknowledge or tell them how a joke got stuck in his rectum. They were taking him to the OR as it has created a vacuum seal and couldn't be removed without shattering, but realized his BSL, blood sugar level, was off the charts. Really high. They were considering postponing the surgery to work out WTF was going on. When he ended up talking, he told them the jar was full of honey before it got lodged, and was rapidly absorbed by the rectum, causing the insane levels. What? Oh bother. Other than all the random things that end up in rectums accidentally? Drunk electrician with the longest drill bit I've ever seen sticking through both legs and impaling his scrotum in between like a really gross kebab. He was so drunk he thought he broke his hip. Denied owning any drill bits or for that matter having been drinking. Most common are the numerous drug tox screens we do that come back positive for something and everyone is shocked. Borderline offended it got into their system. Had a patient in hospital. I forget what for. The point is that he disappeared for a few hours. When he came back he was tachycardic to 160 BPM. Massive pupils. Couldn't sit still. We asked him what he'd taken while he was out. Nothing. He swears. He went to the pub and just drank lemonade. Okay. We say. We're gonna take some blood and find out what you've taken. He then pipes up the friends he was with would think it was funny to spike his drink. What? We asked. Did he think they might have spiked his drink with speed? He says. What do you know? Bloods confirmed that he had taken speed. But he insists he didn't take it. His drink was spiked. I'm a CT tech and I was to scan a woman's abdomen for belly pain. She and her girlfriend were there. I have to have a pregnancy test. I have to have one done. I can't radiate a fetus. I even ask none, so no exceptions. She denies up and down she's pregnant. And then, after the test I did, it said she was. She denied it and demanded a blood test. Since she was a lesbian and never has sex with men. Well, the blood test came back positive also, surprise. And the argument that ensued was biblical. She was arguing with her girlfriend and the nurses and the doctor. I never ended up scanning her and they chalked up her pain to her being pregnant. The look on her girlfriend's face when I said it came back positive was one I will never forget. Edit. Because I've gotten this comment a lot. The woman in the room with the patient was her and they had been together a long time. and the patient had given her so permission, in writing, to allow her to hear her medical information. Many of you are saying you shouldn't have told her in front of her so. And you're partially right in a way. But the patient had given her so that permission. And I did not question it. Had she not, I would have asked her so to leave the room. You can give anyone you deem necessary access, or no access, to your medical information. It's not limited to spouses. I'm a pediatric dentist. So maybe not the type of doctor you were looking for. But this one throws me for a loop every time, so I'll share it. When I sedate kids, they have to be NPO for 8 hours before. So I always ask if they had anything to eat or drink in the morning. Parents never want to admit their kid ate or drank. Even when I remind them it's very important, because if they vomit and aspirate they could die. Often they try to minimize it and say it was just a few bites. But one kid walked in eating a bag of Cheetos at reception, and then the parent insisted to me that they hadn't eaten. Yeah. I'm 100% not sedating your child today. That they don't know how to read. I've been taught the trick of handing a paper upside down to them to see if they can read. It's good to know if they don't. So you can make extra sure they have a full understanding of their instructions instead of saying to read the details on the sheet. Once had a woman come in for us possible yeast infections. On exam she had a glass bottle stuck in her vaginal filled with urine. Totally wouldn't admit it was hers or explain how it got there even after we removed it. Just kept saying "I think this is all a joke and you put it up theories." Yeah. She was totally trying to cheat a drug test. Definitely. The bottle had an overly complicated apparatus which allowed her to discreetly trigger the urine to come out, which made it all the more weird. She pretended we hadn't just pulled CIA tech out of her couch. A very sad one. My mother was a paramedic and she was called to a drug OD. A young male, in his late teens, was drifting in and out of consciousness. Before my mother could treat him, she needed to know what drug he had so my mother could administer the relevant drug. He refused to say in case if the cops showed up and got him done. He was petrified of the consequences that actually didn't exist. You can't be arrested for having drugs in your system. He continued to deny he took any drug to avoid this scenario from happening. But despite my mother insisting to him that he will be okay, he sadly died there and then. I work in an ER taking medication histories for patients that are being admitted. The amount of patients that tell me not to add things to their history is ridiculous. They say that they don't take things like their Norco very often, and after asking a lot I got them to admit they took it today. The best one though is asking husbands about their ED medication. I have to find out when they last took any of their medication, and if a spouse or significant other is in the room the husband gives them a weird look. Like I hope I say the right date so she doesn't think I am using the ED medication with someone else. Guy came in with excruciating back pain. And MRI showed severe bursitis. Well, we knew he had a history of IV drug abuse. So we couldn't send him home with a PICC line to get several weeks of IV antibiotics, easy access. So we was going to be with us for a while. Well, after about 2 weeks, he kept having a sketchy visitor. One night I was working, and a code blue was called. I run to his room to find him sitting at the edge of the bed talking. I'm incredibly confused, because they definitely called a code blue to his room. I look over, and sketchy friend is laying on the bathroom floor with a needle, syringe, spoon, and lighter beside her. She's not breathing and completely grey. Even after 2 rounds of Narcan and transferring her to the ED, he would not admit she was doing drugs. Don't associate with those type of people. 3 Not me, but an Ibjin relative of mine. 30 years ago, young newlywed couple comes in Ibjin emergency room for intense pain. Upon digital examination a mass is felt. Elder surgeon arrives. Examine and pulls out a lemon. Family of the brides demands to know how could a lemon grow there. Daughter stays quiet and blushing. Older surgeon suggests lemon seeds must have migrated from the stomach. Everybody goes home happy. The groom was smirking the whole time. Don't know if this quite fits, but I had a lecturer who told us about a case he came across. He got called out to a nightclub after a fight broke out. He noticed a big 6-foot bloke stood at the bar acting really shifty and overly nervous. My lecturer went up to him and told him if he had any drugs on him to go flush them because the police were checking everyone. Guy insisted that he didn't have drugs. After talking for a while, the guy eventually opens up and says, I am hiding something. I have XYY syndrome. I'm only 12 and I don't want the police to tell my parents. Happened to me, but I was in med school. Was on a gym onc rotation and a 50-something-year-old lady came in with an enormous ovarian mass. It was so big she looked pregnant. She was hiding it from her family members, but it was putting so much pressure in her abdomen that she couldn't eat anymore and was losing weight despite the mass growing to epic size. When we finally removed it, it weighed just shy of 45 pounds. She had lost so much weight that it was almost a third of her mass. She actually ended up doing quite well. The only good thing about a tumor this big is that it's almost always benign. If it had been malignant, she would also have died years earlier from it. I was rotating through trauma surgery my intern year. I was called to the ER to evaluate a mid-30s male who fell off a roof while working. It's standard procedure for any level 1 trauma to cut off their clothes and do a full head-to-toe evaluation. The nurses were about to cut off his pants when he admittedly refused. We kept asking him why, telling him we see this stuff daily. Once we finally cut them off, we found an intact male chastity belt with a gold padlock. He stated that his girlfriend kept the key. And X200B. I've also seen a male come in not once, but twice with a kid's bowling pin up his rectum. The first time he refused to tell how it happened. The second time stated his girlfriend enjoyed it. No sign of the other 8 pins. My mom is a radiographer and she deals with a lot of people who slipped and fell on objects that go up their butt. She really couldn't give a shit what you were doing to get the object stuck at this point, so there's no point trying to hide stuff. Anyway, a kid, probably about 15, came in with his mom because he had a Barbie doll up his ass. He had done the smart thing and pulled its arms off first, but they couldn't see a head on the scan. So my mom had to try and get him to admit to doing it on purpose so he would tell them whether there was a head on the doll before it went in. Apparently he stuck to his gun, saying he didn't do it on purpose, so how would he know? In the end they pulled it out and sent him home. Only for him to come back a week later with severe stomach pains and Wardayak. Now there was a doll's head in his colon. Not a doctor, but the pharmacists I work with are. We constantly get people saying they never missed a day of their meds when the pharmacist does a med adherence review. I got one of those people today. Last time they picked up their prescription was in November. It was a 90-day supply. They deny the math. They should have been out sometime in February. And they're out of refills. Then they ask for a holdover supply, which gets denied because they are not taking it correctly. Holdovers are given at the pharmacist's discretion and it's not something a patient can just demand. Jewelry up her vagina. She was probably in her late 80s and accused us of stealing all her jewelry, a substantial amount of rings, necklaces, bracelets, etc. So we looked for it while she was at a test. She had shoved all of it up there. When we called her son, her healthcare proxy, since she was so gone, to let him know in case she accused the hospital of major theft, he said that's a thing she does all the time because she's afraid of being robbed and it's a safe hiding spot. Dementia. Not even once. That shit is worse than meth addiction. I'm not a doctor, but my father is an alcoholic and he has a heart condition. Nobody is approving that he is drinking, but he still does it. He lives alone and drinks alone. So his condition has gotten worse and we went with him to a private appointment with some heart doctors specialists that we paid, and where they would knew immediately that he is drinking and they would say to him that he must not drink at all with his condition, and he would lie them in their face that he is not drinking. Every single time. I still cannot understand why he is not honest with doctors when they know. I don't get that. So med student here. Working in the emergency med department and was seeing a psyche patient. History of Mandrax use that precipitates schizophrenic episodes. Kept saying he never did any drugs at all leading up to the incident. Mother reported otherwise. But the voices in his head weren't having it. Eventually all my questions would be answered by his other voice blurting out the truth with him looking very surprised and angry at himself. Very interesting experience, but once off his drugs and back on the meds he was white as rain. Well, I have a funny story where I told the truth but no one believed me. I was 14 and was trying to fix my watch with super glue, the kind that gets hard when exposed to air. The little pack I was using was already half used, so the glue was dry on top. To get it out I flicked it a good 2 or 3 times. The third time it fucking blew and splattered everywhere and got into my eye. Thank God it didn't get on my iris. So I got up like that, rinsed it with water. Nothing happened. So I ignored it and went to my tutor's house for studying. My tutor notices my eye is profusely leaking. He calls my mom and dad and they take me to the doctor. Now I tell them everything as it happened exactly because I tend to do mischievous things and also this was an accident. The doctor and my parents won't believe me. I am an above average kid. I am not that retarded to squeeze super glue in my own eye. I showed them the watch for evidence and how it was glued up. To this day my mom and dad bring it up from time to time, tell me that I deliberately hurt myself because it's fun. Edit. Sorry for bad English. Not a doctor or in the human medical world, but I'm a veterinary technician and we always have lying owners. Why? We don't care your dog accidentally ate a pot brownie. Just tell us what he ate so we can properly treat him. Or please tell us the best guess what your dog may have eaten so we can assess the situation carefully and with discretion if necessary. We did surgery for a blocked dog and found some underwear lodged. It was not the wife's underwear. We also get owners telling us their animal hasn't eaten anything that morning so they are good for surgery. Dude. Your dog just threw up fresh food all over me. Even a couple of bites can kill them. They normally vomit right after giving them drugs and right before or while we are putting in the AT tube. Yeah, the perfect time to aspirate. We would rather reschedule than kill your dog, thanks. The vast majority of people with diabetes have a hard time admitting their glycemic profile is not ideal now and then. I'm a 5th year medical student. Last semester I was visiting a diabetic patient, T2, who was clearly having a hypoglycemic crisis. Her fasting glucose value was extreme, and she kept saying it was just a panic attack. Dude. I'm not judging you. Just admit it for heaven's sake. Sometimes it's worse what they do actually admit. This one guy, obese, comes in because of a sharp superficial pain on movement in his upper right loin area. Has no idea what it could be. Takes 2 nurses and me to lift up his belly. Aside from some rash and fungus in the creases. Fierce also a large wooden splinter sticking in his skin. His wife, who was present, exclaims, right. This must be from the love board. Sneeze, though what now? Well. When hubby wants me to get down on him, I lay him on the bed and use the love board to hold up his belly. He must have gotten the splinter from there. I recommended ointments for the fungus. Regular changes of the bandages of the wound. Exercise and a weight reducing diet. As well as using smooth and treated boards in the future to prevent splintering. Have you ever tried to hold down loud laughter and vomiting at the same time?